the young, and the restless spoilers. Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel. Today is a fantastic day to dive deep into the absolute mess that is Genoa City right now. We have been reading all of your comments, and we know you are just as frustrated as we are with some of these storylines. Grab a massive cup of coffee because we have a lot of ground to cover today regarding our favorite chaotic families. Let's jump right in. And let us just start right off the bat with Victoria Newman, because honestly, I am so tired of her right now. Victoria is currently on this ridiculous Protect Dad tour where she is defending Victor to literally anyone who will listen. Even though she knows deep down that Victor is completely out of line with what he has been doing to Jack Abbott. But amidst all of her own family drama, Victoria is somehow finding the time to complain about Summer Newman. Victoria is actually whining and lamenting that Summer is not strong enough or brave enough to come home and confront her mother face to face about this whole corporate takeover mess. Victoria is sitting there complaining that Summer just wrote a letter, and you know what, for once, I actually agree with Victoria. I mean, maybe I am being too harsh on Summer, but Victoria is right. A letter is just not going to cut it, not when it comes to Phyllis Summers. So Summer wrote this incredibly harsh letter to Phyllis. She poured all of her anger and her frustration into this piece of paper, basically telling her mother that she is completely done with her. She formally cut ties, and Daniel did the same thing, which is a whole other mess. But Victoria is looking at this letter and saying it is not enough. She wants Summer to march back into Genoa City and stand toe-to-toe with Phyllis because Phyllis is actively trying to steal their grandfather's company. Phyllis is teaming up with Kane Ashby of all people to launch a hostile takeover of Newman Enterprises, and Victoria thinks Summer needs to be the one to stop it. And honestly, it is not enough for Victoria, and it is absolutely not enough for us as viewers. We have been watching this show for way too long to settle for off-screen letters. We need the drama. We need the screaming matches in the middle of the GCC dining room. Because let us be real here guys, Phyllis is spiraling completely out of control. When Phyllis gets a letter like that, she does not sit down and reflect on her poor life choices. She does not go to therapy. She burns the world down. That is what Phyllis does. She is hurt. She is isolated. Her kids have disowned her. And so she is projecting all of that massive pain into this corporate war. She is lashing out at Lily Winters. She is plotting with Kane. She is acting like a complete maniac. A piece of paper with some angry words from Summer is not going to snap Phyllis out of this destructive cycle. It is probably just fueling her rage even more. Summer needs to come back to Genoa City as soon as possible. We need her back on canvas. The fans on social media have been screaming for this, and the writers really need to deliver. But let us zoom out for a second and talk about why Summer actually left in the first place. Because it wasn't just about her mother being a walking disaster area. Summer left Genoa City at least in part because she absolutely could not stomach the sight of Kyle and Claire together, and honestly, we do not blame her one bit. Sometimes we felt exactly the same way watching those two. It was just too much. It was nauseating. The sickly sweet smiles, the holding hands, the constant validation of each other. It was like watching a bad Hallmark movie right in the middle of our soap opera. Every time Kyle and Claire shared a scene, it was just dripping with this artificial sweetness that made you want to change the channel. And Summer had to watch that. She had to stand there and watch her ex-husband parade his shiny new perfect girlfriend all over town. She had to watch Claire step into this ready-made family dynamic that used to belong to her. That would make anyone sick to their stomach. I would have packed my bags and left town too. Okay, maybe that sounded dramatic, but you get what I mean. It is incredibly painful to watch the person you love move on so quickly and so publicly, especially when they are acting like teenagers in love. So Summer packed up and got out of Dodge. She needed space. She needed to not look at Kyle and Claire making hard eyes at each other over coffee at Crimson Lights. But guess what? The universe has a funny way of working things out. Because Kyle and Claire are not together anymore, the sickeningly sweet romance has imploded. They are done. And this changes absolutely everything for the canvas right now. The dynamic has completely shifted. The roadblock that pushed Summer out of town has been removed. And we all know exactly who Kyle Abbott is. We have known him for years. Kyle is a serial monogamist who is absolutely terrified of being alone. The man cannot function without a woman in his life to validate him and support his massive ego. He bounces from relationship to relationship faster than anyone else on this show. So if Summer has even a tiny fraction of a desire to reunite with her ex-husband, the timing literally could not be more perfect. The window is wide open. Kyle is single, he is vulnerable, and he is currently getting himself wrapped up in this toxic alliance with his mother Diane. They are actively targeting Victoria and the Newmans, completely ignoring Abby by the way because the Newmans barely remember Abby exists, which is a whole other rant for another day. But my point is, Kyle is spiraling into his darker Abbott tendencies, and he doesn't have a partner to anchor him. If Summer swoops back into town right now, she could completely turn his world upside down. And maybe I am second-guessing myself here. Maybe Summer shouldn't want Kyle back. The man has put her through absolute hell over the years, but they have this magnetic pull. They always find their way back to each other. The writers love to play with this dynamic. And right now, the stage is perfectly set for a massive romantic collision. Summer coming back to find Kyle single, Claire out of the picture, and the Abbott and Newman families at each other's throats. It is soap opera gold. What are the writers waiting for? Bring her back and let her cause some chaos. Let her interrupt one of Kyle's smug little plotting sessions with Diane. The look on his face would be absolutely priceless. But honestly, putting the romance and the corporate wars aside for a minute, there is a much bigger, much more heartbreaking reason why Summer needs to get on the next flight back to Genoa City. And that reason is a little boy named Harrison. Oh my God, you guys, we need to talk about Harrison. We really need to have a serious conversation about what is happening to this poor child because it is actually tragic. The adults in his life are failing him on a spectacular level. And I am honestly a bit tired of watching this kid get tossed around like a prop whenever the plot demands it. Let us just review the absolute trauma that Harrison has endured in his short little life. First of all, he loses the man he thought was his father, Ashland Locke. Then he loses his biological mother, Tara Locke, who gets sent to prison. So he loses the people he called mom and dad. His entire world is shattered. Then he gets a brand new dad in Kyle Abbott. Okay, fine. He adjusts. Then he gets a brand new mom in Summer. And for a while, things are good. Summer actually steps up. She loves that little boy. She acts like a real mother to him. They build a bond. But then what happens? The adults ruin it. The marriage falls apart. The new mom leaves. Summer packs up and leaves town because she can't handle the drama with Kyle and Phyllis. And Harrison is left behind again. He is abandoned again. And then, before the kid can even process that Summer is gone, Kyle brings in the new girlfriend. Suddenly Claire is the new maternal figure. She is the nanny turned girlfriend turned instant mom. And Harrison is supposed to just attach himself to her. And he does, because he is a little kid who just wants a mother. And now Claire is gone too. The relationship with Kyle is over, and Claire has exited the Abbott mansion. So where does that leave Harrison? I will tell you where it leaves him. According to everything we are seeing, Harrison is basically living in the kitchen with Mrs. Martinez. I am not even joking. The Abbott family cook is essentially raising the heir to the Abbott empire right now. Because Kyle is too busy plotting hostile takeovers and hanging out at the GCC trying to destroy Victoria, and Jack and Diane are too busy fighting their own wars against Victor. And let us just talk about Mrs. Martinez for a second. Bless her heart. The woman is a saint. She is probably in that kitchen right now, up to her elbows in flour, trying to keep this traumatized little boy distracted. She has way more important things to worry about these days than just baking cookies. She is playing therapist, mother, and babysitter to a child who has literally had a revolving door of parents. It is absurd. It is actually ridiculous when you think about it. Who actually believes this is going to end well for Harrison's psychological development? The kid is going to need years of intense therapy. Harrison desperately needs one of his actual parents to step up. And since Kyle is currently acting like a smug, revenge-obsessed teenager, Summer needs to be the one to do it. Summer needs to come home for Harrison. She needs to walk into that Abbott mansion, march right past Jack and Diane, go straight into the kitchen, thank Mrs. Martinez for her service, and take her son back. Because whether she is biologically related to him or not, Summer was a mother to that boy. She promised to always be there for him. And right now, he is alone in a massive, cold house full of warring adults. And sometimes I look at the bigger pattern of this show. The writers have this habit of writing children into corners and then just ignoring them until they are magically aged up as teenagers with attitude problems. We have seen it a million times. But this storyline with Harrison feels different, or at least, it should feel different, because they have spent so much time establishing how much trauma he has been through. They literally had a whole storyline about him being kidnapped recently. Remember that? And by the way, Kyle just dropped the massive bombshell on Victoria that Patty Williams was the woman involved in Jack's kidnapping, so the whole town is dealing with kidnapping trauma. And Harrison is just sitting in the kitchen eating snickerdoodles. It makes no sense. Summer returning would instantly ground the show. It would give us a character who actually has a clear, emotional motivation that isn't just about stealing a company or getting revenge. She would be coming back to protect her family. She would be coming back to protect Harrison. And yes, she would be coming back to deal with her mother. Because Victoria is right. A letter is a coward's way out. Summer is a Newman. She is Phyllis's daughter. She has fire in her veins. She doesn't just write a strongly worded letter and hide. She needs to come back and look Phyllis in the eye and tell her that she is destroying her own life. Imagine the scenes we could get. Just picture it. Summer walks into the GCC. Phyllis is sitting there with Kane Ashby, plotting their hostile takeover. Summer walks right up to the table, slams her hands down, and just tears into her mother. She calls out the hypocrisy, the manipulation, the absolute insanity of teaming up with Kane to attack Victor. Phyllis would be stunned. She would try to defend herself. She would try to play the victim, but Summer wouldn't let her. It would be Emmy Award-winning material. Michelle Stafford and Allison Lanier would absolutely kill a scene like that. And then Summer turns her on and runs into Kyle. Kyle, who is single now. Kyle, who looks exhausted and lost without Claire. The tension between them would be thick enough to cut with a knife. He would try to act cool, try to act like he has everything under control with Diane, but Summer would see right through it. She knows him better than anyone. She knows he is spiraling. And then she demands to see Harrison. She demands to take Harrison out of that toxic Abbott environment. The custody fight, the lingering romantic feelings, the family loyalty. It is all right there on a silver platter for the writers to use. But instead, we are getting Victoria complaining about letters. We are getting Noah and Audra holding hands at crimson lights while Sienna watches them like a hawk. Which, by the way, is a whole other mess. Sienna is clearly marking her territory, cuddling up to Noah right in front of Audra. And Holden is warning Audra that Sienna knows her Los Angeles secrets. It is messy. It is dramatic, but it is not the core family drama that we are craving right now. We need the heavy hitters. We need the Abbott and Newman legacy characters front and center. And Nick is no help right now either. Nick is out in Vegas, supposedly looking for Matt Clark, but he is totally compromised. He is struggling with fentanyl, passing out on the phone with Sharon and Chelsea. He is completely vulnerable, so Nick can't be the one to reel Phyllis in. Nick can't be the one to protect Summer's interests. He is too busy fighting his own demons and asking Adam how far he is willing to go, while Adam is distracted by Reza Thompson kissing him. The men in Summer's life are completely useless right now. Her father is incapacitated in Vegas, her ex-husband is playing corporate games with his mother, and her grandfather is acting like a ruthless dictator. Summer has to be her own hero. She has to be Harrison's hero. She cannot stay away any longer. The fans are practically begging for it. Every time I log onto Twitter, half the timeline is just people asking where Summer is and why she is letting Claire and Kyle get away with everything. Well, Claire is gone now. The excuse is gone. The barrier is removed. It is time to come home. And let us not forget the Phyllis factor in all of this. Phyllis is dangerous right now. A cornered Phyllis is the most dangerous person in Genoa City. She has nothing left to lose. Summer and Daniel have completely cut her off. She feels abandoned. And when Phyllis feels abandoned, she burns bridges. She is going to do something that she cannot take back. She is going to cross a line with Victor or with Lily Winters. We already saw her harshly criticizing Lily over that fake kidnapping stunt. Phyllis is picking fights with everyone. If Summer doesn't come back and intervene, Phyllis might end up in prison again, or worse. So yeah, Victoria's annoying. Victoria's protect dad tour is exhausting. But a broken clock is right twice a day. Victoria's right about Summer. The letter was weak. The letter was a half measure. We need full measures right now. We need the messy, emotional, screaming, crying, hugging soap opera drama that made us fall in love with this show in the first place. We need Summer to burst through those doors, confront her mother, reclaim her son from the Abbott kitchen, and figure out what the hell she is going to do about Kyle. Honestly, I am just so invested in this. I know I am rambling a bit, but it just frustrates me when the show leaves these massive emotional threads hanging in the wind. You have a traumatized kid, a spiraling mother, a single ex-husband, and a corporate war. All the pieces are there. Just bring the character back and light the match. Let the explosion happen. I don't know, guys. Maybe I am expecting too much. Maybe the writers have a totally different plan. But if they just leave Harrison eating cookies with Mrs. Martinez for the next 6 months, I am going to lose my mind. That kid deserves better. Summer deserves better than to be written off as someone who just sends angry letters and hides. She is stronger than that. She has survived way too much to just fade into the background. So let's cross our fingers and hope that the powers that be are listening. We want Summer Newman back in Genoa City. We want her confronting Phyllis. We want her saving Harrison. And we want her shaking up Kyle's completely unearned confidence. It is time. It is past time. All right. I need to take a breath. I have been staring at this screen for way too long and my coffee is completely cold. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you agree with Victoria that Summer's letter wasn't enough? Are you glad Kyle and Claire broke up? And seriously, who is going to rescue poor Harrison from the kitchen? Drop your thoughts below, and I will see you guys in the next update. Stay restless, everyone. There are some breakups that happen with shouting, betrayal, slammed doors, and signatures on the emotional paperwork before the dust has even settled. And then there are breakups like this one. The kind that feel almost worse because they expose something quieter and more humiliating. Kyle and Claire ending things is not just the collapse of a romance. It is the collapse of an idea. The idea that two people standing far enough away from the poison in their families can somehow build a clean future simply by wanting one badly enough. Genoa City has never allowed anything that simple. In this town, love is rarely permitted to remain only love. It becomes inheritance, territory, revenge, leverage, image, and often a referendum on which family legacy will devour the other first. That is why this split matters so much. It is not only about two people realizing they can no longer keep carrying the weight pressing down on them from every side. It is about one child remembering the woman who made him feel safe, one absent woman whose return could turn grief into accusation. And two monsters in different packaging, Victor and Phyllis, whose most striking similarity is that they both leave emotional wreckage behind them and then act offended when someone dares to name it. Kyle has always wanted to believe he is more self-aware than the people who raised him, more modern, more emotionally agile, less willing to let family wars define the shape of his private life. But men like Kyle often discover too late that intelligence is not the same thing as freedom. He understands toxicity. He can identify manipulation when it is being used against him. He can even criticize it eloquently. And yet when it comes time to separate his heart from the machinery of Abbott-Newman conflict, he fails in subtler ways. He keeps trying to make impossible arrangements sound reasonable. He keeps acting as if love can survive under siege as long as he explains himself well enough. Claire, for all her relative innocence in this world, may have understood before he did that explanations are not protection. Understanding why something is difficult does not make it less destructive. That realization is often what ends relationships in Genoa City, not the lack of love, but the dawning awareness that love is being asked to do work it was never built to do. Claire is perhaps the most tragic person in this whole configuration because she arrived in the Newman orbit carrying trauma sharp enough to make her morally alert in ways the others are not. She knows what it means to be controlled. She knows what it means to live inside someone else's design. She knows the frightening intimacy of manipulation, the way it can masquerade as care, destiny, or protection while quietly erasing the victim's sense of self. So when her relationship with Carl began to absorb more and more pressure from Victor's schemes, from family loyalties, from the strange expectation that she should somehow make peace with structures that have always been rotten, she likely began to see the terrible truth. A romance can become another system of pressure if both people are constantly being forced to justify its existence to everyone else. Claire did not need Carl to stop loving her in order to leave. She only needed to realize that staying meant slowly surrendering the hard-won clarity that had allowed her to survive before. That is why the breakup stings. It is not a failure of chemistry. It is a failure of environment, of timing, of the impossible burden placed onto people who were supposed to be each other's refuge and instead became each other's reminder of how impossible refuge really is in this town. Carl probably wanted to fight harder, to argue that they could still make it work, that Harrison adored her, that they had already survived so much. But those arguments, however heartfelt, may have sounded hollow to Claire once she understood that survival was becoming the relationship's only measurable achievement. And survival is not the same thing as peace. A woman with Claire's history does not need another relationship that demands endurance as proof of devotion. She needs room to breathe without feeling recruited into a family or every time she turns her own. Then there is Harrison, and that may be the cruelest part of all. Adults always tell themselves that children are resilient, that they adapt, that they do not understand the full scope of what is happening and therefore cannot be hurt by it in the same way. That is one of the most convenient lies grown people use to survive their own guilt. Harrison may not understand the entire emotional architecture surrounding Carl and Claire, but he understands absence. He understands the missing warmth where a routine used to be. He understands that someone who smiled at him, cared for him, grounded his world in small and steady ways, is no longer there in the same place. Children do not need legal definitions or adult explanations to feel loss. In some ways, they feel it more purely because they have not yet learned how to disguise it with rationalization. Harrison missing his stepmother is not a side note. It is the emotional pressure point that could crack open everyone else's denial. Because once a child voices pain, all the adults who have been busy defending their choices are suddenly forced to confront the human cost of those choices in a form that cannot be spun. Carl can tell himself the breakup was necessary. Claire can tell herself it was healthier to walk away. Summer, if she returns, can tell herself she is simply stepping back into a role that was always partially hers. Victor can tell himself that strong families make hard sacrifices. Phyllis can tell herself that all she has ever done was fight for the people she loves, but a lonely child cuts through all of that. His grief exposes the vanity in adult conflicts. It reveals how often the people making the loudest claims about protection are actually the ones destabilizing the world around him. And that is where Summer becomes fascinating. Not because she is a simple solution, and certainly not because her return would magically heal anything, but because she is one of the few people who could walk into this emotional minefield and speak hard truths without needing anyone's permission. If she comes back into town and finds Harrison aching for Claire, finds Kyle emotionally frayed, finds the Newman and Abbott world still rotting under the pressure of Victor's vendettas and Phyllis's perpetual emotional hijacking, then she occupies a rare and powerful position. She is both inside and outside. She belongs to these people, but she is not currently embedded in their daily excuses. That distance gives her clarity, and clarity is often the one thing nobody in Genoa City can tolerate when it points in all directions at once. The most delicious part of the scenario is the possibility that Summer would not just come for one side, she would come for both. She could look at Phyllis and say what so few people say with enough bluntness, that relentless love is not the same thing as healthy love. That charging into every crisis as if it belongs to you is not devotion but intrusion. That making your emotions everyone else's emergency is not passion but narcissism. Phyllis survives on being framed as chaotic but loving, destructive but deeply feeling, impossible but sincere. That mythology has protected her for years. It allows people to forgive behavior they would never tolerate from someone less charismatic. But Summer, of all people, has paid the price for her mother's emotional selfishness too many times not to recognize the pattern. She knows what it is like to be loved by a storm that never stops calling itself home. And then Summer could turn to Victor and do something just as necessary. She could strip away the myth of patriarchy, the performance of noble ruthlessness, the old excuse that everything he does is for family. Because what is Victor, at his core, if not another person who has spent years insisting that the harm he causes is justified by the intensity of his intentions? That is where the comparison to Phyllis becomes so sharp it almost feels obscene, because Victor would hate it precisely for being true. He and Phyllis both believe their motives sanctify their damage. They both convince themselves that because they love fiercely, because they feel deeply, because they are protecting something, the emotional casualties around them are unfortunate but acceptable. They both destabilize rooms by entering them. They both rewrite other people's boundaries as obstacles. They both resent being judged by the pain they cause because, in their minds, their passion is its own defense. That is not a compliment. It is an indictment. Summer may be one of the few characters who can see that symmetry and say it aloud without flinching. She could tell Victor that his obsession with controlling outcomes has ruined as many lives as Phyllis's obsession with controlling emotions. She could tell Phyllis that at least Victor rarely pretends his manipulations are accidental. She could point out that one of them wears power like a crown and the other wears chaos like a personality trait, but both leave people exhausted, destabilized, and forced to clean up damage they never asked for. And the beauty of that confrontation is that neither Victor nor Phyllis would be changed by it. They are too old in their patterns, too attached to their own self-image, to practice at converting criticism into evidence that others simply do not understand them. But watching someone finally say it, calmly and with precision, would still matter. Sometimes the value of truth is not that it reforms the guilty. Sometimes the value is simply that it is spoken in a room that has been suffocating under euphemism for too long. Kyle would not escape Summer's judgment either, and that is important, because however much sympathy he deserves, he also deserves scrutiny. He allowed his relationship with Claire to become entangled in dynamics he should have recognized earlier. He may have been sincere, but sincerity is not the same thing as stewardship. When a child becomes attached to a new parental figure, when a woman with Claire's history is invited into a world full of family warfare, when exes, grandfathers, mothers, and opportunists all hover around the edges of the relationship, care has to be more than emotional. It has to be strategic in the healthiest sense. Kyle should have protected the space more fiercely. He should have understood that love under pressure needs boundaries, not just reassurance. If Harrison is now grieving and Claire is gone, Kyle must live with the unbearable thought that maybe he wanted things to work badly enough that he ignored how badly the environment was damaging them.